Now, I'm decided that I must be officially getting old. I know that's hard to believe, but when I was a youngster, I told myself, why do people ever use the lectionary? And I now use the lectionary. And I think it's wonderful because it forces me to confront stuff that I would much rather just ignore or bypass or pretend isn't there. But it is there, and it's the Word of God. So we have two readings this morning. Both are from the lectionary. The New Testament one is the well-known story from Luke chapter 12, 13, the rich man, or the foolish rich man, who builds the barn. I'm sure you remember that one. The Old Testament story is from the prophet Hosea. And over the last few weeks, the lectionary, it took us through a little bit of Amos first, and then into Hosea. So I'm going to, before Joy comes and reads, I just want to spend a little bit of time setting the context, particularly for Hosea, because our Old Testament is a little bit rusty, I think, if we're being honest, and working out how these people fit into the big scheme, it's somewhat a little bit difficult. Now, last Sunday, if you were here, you would have heard Phil talking about Joshua. Joshua is the guy who led the people. They spent 40 years in the wilderness. Moses, right at the end of Deuteronomy, he's shown the promised land, but God says, I'm afraid you're not getting there, mate. And he pops his clogs, so he doesn't go in. Although he does make it in the end. If you look at the transfiguration, he's there with Jesus. So he does get there, but not first time round. So Joshua takes over from him. And before he does, Moses warns the people to not lose sight of God. He tells them, you're going to live in houses you didn't build. You're going to have vineyards that you didn't plant. You're going to draw water from wells that you didn't dig. God is giving you all of this. God is fundamental to your future. There is a covenant between us. So he warns people and says, make sure you don't go off after other gods, because you are surrounded by tribes and nations that worship other gods. You must, he emphasizes it again and again, keep God at the center. Joshua takes over, and you know some of the stories of Joshua, you know, walls of Jericho, flattened, all of that. They conquer eventually the tribes, the nation, and then the 12 tribes settle. And the nation is divided up, and each tribe gets a chunk of the land that we think of as Israel. And things have changed a little bit now, because in the desert, the tabernacle was physically at their center. And when they set up camp, they had to set up camp around it in a kind of cross shape, with the tabernacle, you know, God at their center. But now, of course, they're spread out all over the place, the 12 tribes. And there's not much apart from the faith to unite them and to keep them sort of, you know, on the single track. Every now and again, they raise up a judge to sort out a problem that's occurred. And the tribes can choose their judges. That's built into the plan. And you know, you've heard of people like Samson, you know, defeating the Philistines. There's a few judges there. But eventually the people say, no, we've had enough of judges, because they've looked to Egypt. And Egypt's got a huge, strong army with a pharaoh at the head. And they want an army. And to have an army, you've got to have a king. So they say, we want a king. And God tries to talk them out of it and says, you know, kings come expensive. They'll put a tax on you. They'll take your young men, they'll take your young women. It'll be a huge burden. God wanted them to have him at their center. But they insisted. So first they get Saul, and you know how that went. Not good. Then they get David. did go good, unites the 12 tribes. For the first time, they are one people. And as an empire, there's about to be a temple when Solomon, his son, builds it. And so the temple is built at Jerusalem, Ark is there. For a period, all is good. But Solomon, although he starts off with wisdom, he ends up with about 1 million, that's a slight exaggeration, lots of wives and concubines and therefore offspring. And after his death, the rot sets in. Before long, there is a virtual civil war between Israel in the north, the 10 tribes, and the 2 tribes of Judah down in the south with Jerusalem. Almost a civil war. In the north, there's a whole series of bad kings. And if you're old enough to remember the likes of Dynasty and Dallas, and the plotting, yes you do, the plotting and the conspiracies and all of that, it's like that in the north, but it's for real. And there's a whole series of kings plotting against the previous guy, and they bump him off so they can become king. And they last just a few years, a few short years for those kings. In the south, in Judah, there's far more good kings, and their reigns are much better. So Judah fares better and survives a little bit longer. So after the breakup, the division of the kingdom, in the north, Israel, there's a lot of wealth. Geologically, it's placed between the meeting place of 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia. They all come together there. Trade routes pass through. People are making a lot of money. But the division between rich and poor is getting bigger and bigger. There's a fantastic parallel between us today and the world of Amos and Hosea. Amos and Hosea, they're at the same time just about. Hosea is 3 or 4 years, maybe 10 years after Amos. But Amos comes first to the people. And to make things worse for the Israelites, he's from Judah. He's an outsider. And he's not a posh guy. He looks after fig trees. That's not the ultimate profession in the status symbols. And he comes in and says, "You've had it, guys. God is going to turn his back on you." But he tells them why. And we need to take note of the reasons why. Because they have built false altars. At Bethel, where Jacob saw the ladder to heaven, as well as a temple or a tabernacle to God, to Yahweh, there's a huge, great golden calf. So that people can make an offering to Yahweh and then go and make sacrifices to the Baals, the golden calf gods. And that was seen as okay. The wealthy, as I said, are getting richer and richer. There is corruption amongst the powerful. Not only are they plotting against the people in power, they're bribing the judges so that everything goes their way. They're ignoring the poverty and the plight of the ordinary folk, the guys who have virtually nothing. It's all about them. So Amos is bringing a warning. He's bringing the judgment of God, saying, God is going to turn his back on you. They've also made alliances with Egypt, alliances with Assyria, because they think that's going to keep them safe. And Amos says, no, you've turned away from God, and he's going to bring judgment. And as I said, a few years after Amos has appeared, Hosea turns up. And he's got a message completely different to Amos. There's still a warning embedded in it, but he is full of God's love, God's care for his people. I'll shut up there, and Joy's going to bring us the message.
Yes, this is from Hosea chapter 11. God's love for Israel. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. But the more they were called, the more they went away from me. They sacrificed to the Baals, and they burnt incense to images. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking him by the arms, but they did not realize it was I who healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with ties of love. To them I was like one who lifts a little child to the cheek, and I bent down to feed them. Will they not return to Egypt? And will not Assyria rule over them because they refuse to repent? A sword will flash in their cities. It will devour their false prophets and put an end to their plans. My people are determined to turn from me. Even though they call me God Most High, I will by no means exalt them. How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel? How can I treat you like Admah? How can I make you like Zeboim? My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused. I will not carry out my fierce anger, nor will I devastate Ephraim again. For I am God and not a man, the Holy One among you. I will not come against their cities. They will follow the Lord. He will roar like a lion. When he roars, his children will come trembling from the west. They will come from Egypt, trembling like sparrows, from Assyria, fluttering like doves. I will settle them in their homes, declares the Lord. And from the New Testament, Luke chapter 12, the parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide my inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God." Thanks be to God.
Thank you very much, Joy. Now, I don't know if you saw any similarity between the two readings, but they do have something in common. In the reading we had from Luke, in that very short parable, I counted about a dozen personal pronouns. I, my. It's all about me. And when we read Hosea, from a national point of view, it's all about me. God doesn't get a mention. The whole of the Hosea story is kind of horrible but nice. And there's a lot of sort of biblical things which hit us like that. Because it tells us that God tells Hosea to marry a prostitute. And that is a living metaphor for the relationship between God and the people Israel. They are constantly betraying him. And then partway through the story, his wife Gomer leaves him and prostitutes, and she falls so far into sin that she kind of has to sell herself, as was not common, but as sometimes happens in Old Testament times, where if you got so much into debt, you sold yourself into slavery for a certain amount of years. And that's what had happened to Gomer's wife. And Hosea goes and redeems her, the proper meaning of the word, buys her back. And it's not just a picture of God and Israel, it's a picture of Jesus and us. We are redeemed. But of course, underneath it all, the thing that binds the whole thing together is the love that God has for us. And I think this is something we struggle with. Now, in the days when I used to teach, long time ago now, I used to tell the kids, I used to challenge the kids with this idea of love. I'd write it there, big 4 letters on the board, L-O-V-E. And then we'd look at what that actually means to people. And so you'd get the obvious things like, being in love, whatever that means, and I try and get that to break down. And I'm afraid I'm an old, cynical sort of Hector. And so I'm digging beneath all the gooey stuff and the Mills and Boon and all of that. And I'm after something a bit more real and concrete. And I give the kids 2 images to get their heads around. And the first one is a wedding that's going on in church. And the vows that people make, where it's for richer, for poorer, in sickness, in health. The vows mean that whatever happens, I'm committing myself to you. And the only thing that will stop that and end it is death. So those wedding vows is all that I am. I'm committing to you. And then because I'm a miserable Hector, I lead them on a little bit and say, as they come out of the church after the wedding, confetti all over the place, the bride steps into the road and gets hit by a bus. And she's now paralyzed. And they've just made all these vows. I then say to the kids, suppose you're the one not paralyzed. What's going through your head? Are you now looking for a way out after all of those promises? Or does the promise you make mean whatever happens, if she spends the rest of her life quadriplegic, in a wheelchair, totally dependent, is that what you've signed up for? Because that's what the vows said. That's what you just promised. That's how deep that love is. It's not a feeling at that point, it's a commitment. That's scenario 1, not exactly cheerful, but that's what I hit them with. Then scenario 2, I asked them to imagine a couple of, say, 18-year-olds madly, madly in love. She's gorgeous, he's fit, what could possibly go wrong? All is amazing. And if you work out what the definition of love is there, well, it's trust and commitment and all those kind of things. And then I say, right, we're now going to jump forward 72 years. This couple are now 90. And they're sat in their living room, in their rocking chairs, drinking their cocoa, cat on each lap, watching Emmerdale. How has the love changed? Is it a different kind of love? Because to get from the 18-year-old to the 90-year-old, that couple will have gone through ups and downs, challenges, battles, probably times when they thought about leaving their partner, maybe times when they did leave their partner but came back. They will have been through the ups and downs of life, but something kept them together. So at the age of 90, they can do all those things. I told that story at Crown Hill a little while ago, and a couple came to me at the end, and she was in a wheelchair and he was pushing her, and they said, well, we're 90. We've got one rocking chair, and we don't watch Emmerdale, so it wasn't all correct. Yeah. But whatever the vision is, the point I'm making there is love isn't just a feeling that comes and goes, that ebbs and flows. You know, when your toddler is posting, to show my age now, but when my toddler used to post the Marmite on toast into the DVD player, I'm not thinking, oh, I love her. I'm thinking, get away from the DVD player. You're going to ruin it. But I remember my firstborn, probably, I've got no idea, helpless, so I'm going for 4 months, no idea. But my wife foolishly left me to look after this baby. And it was a sunny day, so I thought we'd go out on the lawn. What could possibly go wrong? Put a blanket down, baby there. She could just about start to, no, she couldn't crawl. She was just sort of blobby, sort of on the floor. And I must have looked away for 30 seconds, if that. And I looked back, and there was blood all over her face. My whole world crashed. I'm thinking, what do I do? I think at the end of the day, because it's a tiny, tiny, tiny cut on her lip, I think she'd got a blade of grass had cut her lip. I think it was as simple as that. That's the only thing I can put it down to. But at that moment, I knew how much I loved my daughter. There was a feeling. It wasn't a get away from the DVD player feeling. It was, what have I done? What can I do to put it right? What I'm trying to do here is to get you into the mindset, the heart of God. Did you hear the words? When Israel was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt, I called my son. This is tender. This is in-your-face intimacy from the God of the universe, trying to tell his people that he loves them so much. And please, as I'm talking about Israel, put yourself into that space. Because God says exactly the same to us. Don't you see how much I love you? It's tender. You know, it was I who taught Ephraim, that's another name for Israel, to walk, taking him by the arms. All the way from Egypt, he tried to get them to understand that he needed to be at the center of their being, the center of their lives. Because that way, they were in a safe space. They were loved and in the loving arms of a father. If we went back, I'm not going to ask you to do it, but Hosea chapter 6, I made a note of it. It's the one I started off with. For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. The knowledge of God. Get your head around that. What does that mean? Well, when you look at Amos and Hosea and you put the two together, you get a very clear picture of people who have lost sight of God. Their knowledge is limited to the rituals, the sacrifices. There's no depth there. There is no heart. If you ask my wife, and please don't, she would tell you at great length that I've got one or two faults, and things are my faults. I get attached to things. It's a family joke. Well, not in all parts of the family because I don't laugh. But it's a family joke that whenever I go to Go Outdoors, my favourite shop in the whole world, I'm going to come back with a jacket of some sort. She seems to think I've got too many jackets. How can you have too many jackets? I have friends from when I was a teacher. I still help out with the D of E. And I always get asked to bring a barbecue because they know that whatever the situation, however many people it will need to feed, I will have a barbecue to fit the bill because I sort of collect barbecues. It just happens. I'm still looking for the ultimate barbecue. I'm not quite there yet. I collect things. And somehow I tell myself that these things will make me happier. Yeah, and I'll be more satisfied and a better human being for it, just by buying things. My wife somehow remains far happier than me, and she doesn't even know what Amazon is. You know? I don't understand that. She has uncovered a truth that I'm struggling with. For me, it's I, my, me. What do I want? How am I doing? How am I going to look after myself? And that's exactly as the same as the Israelites. In their wealth and in their worshipping false gods, we may not build golden calves anymore, but we certainly have false gods that we worship to. And it may be a career, it may be a thing, it may be a car, it may be a status, it may be looks. But we still have those golden calves all over the place. And God hates it because it puts a barrier between you and his love. And when you come to that rich fool, notice a couple of things. His land was fertile. Who do we credit for that? We sometimes need reminding that every breath we take is there by the grace of God. Occasionally we are reminded by earthquakes and tsunamis and volcanoes how fragile this physical world is and how small we are in comparison. But God is bigger than all of it. And when he decides he will wrap up the world, that will happen. And for the Israelites and the Israelite nation here, the northern kingdom, a few years after Hosea speaks, the Assyrians invade. Judgment comes upon them, and they are taken away as exiles. And 100 or so years later, the southern kingdom, Judah, falls as well for pretty much the same reasons. There's a message of judgment and of love. And God reaches out to us now and says, get rid of the things in your life that have nothing to do with me, that put a barrier between you and me. That wealthy man, there's nothing wrong with being rich, but there is a danger there. I love the quote from Chaucer, wasn't it? Pardon his tale, I believe. Radix malorum est cupiditas. The root of all evil is money, or money is the root of all evil. The Bible puts it slightly differently. Money is the root of many evils. But when there is money there, we have a tendency to put our trust and our faith in it, because that's going to pay the bills and the mortgage and the groceries and the electric bill and all of that. God is bigger than that. And this rich man is called the fool because nowhere in his thinking does God or the things of God feature at all. God has given him a fertile land, as he did the Israelites. And there's a bountiful harvest, as there was for the northern kingdom. There was wealth. And that pushed God out. I am so grateful that my wife and I, we started our married life unemployed, basically. And so we started off struggling, but we struggled together. I reckon if we'd started off loaded, it would have been so easy. I once stomped out, I'll share something with you. I once had a screaming argument with my wife about eggs. There were no eggs in the fridge. I was not a happy chap. And about 3 a.m, this is the stupidest argument we've ever had, I stomped off. If I was loaded, I'd have probably got a taxi to the train station and got a train to somewhere, or a hotel or something like that. But when you can't afford anything, you don't go very far when you stomp off. You get cold, you turn around and you come back. Sometimes wealth can be a problem. And for the Israelites and for us today, certainly for this rich fool, it was a problem. Because it takes the place of God, the one we should depend upon. If we read on in the reading, we talk about the gifts that a good father will give to his children. I think a lot of you will know that our youngest daughter is autistic. She has autism. And although she's kind of happy enough in her own world is limited. She spends her life with headphones on, plugged into her computer. And it's quite rare for her to want to go somewhere. But a couple of weeks ago, she said, "Can we go for a picnic?" And so last Saturday, we loaded up the car, we loaded up bags, we loaded up daughter with headphones on, parked at Harford, walked up the hill onto the moor, sat by the river, had a gorgeous time together. There's lots of things I could have been doing on Saturday afternoon last, but my daughter that I loved wanted to spend time with us. That's precious. How much time do we give to our Father? How often do we say, "I want to spend time with you, God"? And I don't think it has to be a special set of time. For some people that works, having time set aside. And if you're organized and regular in everything, that's fine, that's brilliant. But for a lot of us, just where we're at, talk to God. Because the people of the Northern Kingdom hadn't even realized how far they were from their God. That rich guy, God's not in his thinking at all. And he pays the price. We don't know how long we've got. None of us do. I retired a year ago, and I remember the day that I retired, maths teacher there was talking to me about his plans for retiring this year. He died about 2 months ago. All of his plans came to nothing. We have a limited time. We don't know how long. We need to get right with God. We need to talk to God. Call it prayer. That's just a posh word for talking to God. Jesus has done the work so we can do it. We are washed clean. Claim it. Talk to your Creator. That is my message. So I'm going to stop there before you start chucking things at me.